Hello. Here we are again on a quiet night, returning together to Rome. But this time, it is no longer the Rome of victories. It is no longer the Rome united under one will. Instead, Rome is now like a giant ship, pulled by eddies from within. A civil war has broken out. Julius Caesar, a general, a leader, and a symbol, has entered history with the sword and betrayal. Then, from the ashes of the Republic, a new empire was born under the hands of his successor, Octavian, who later became known to the world as Augustus. In this part, we will go through those great changes together, through the death of the Republic, through the birth of an empire, and open the door to Rome's most glorious period. When a storm is brewing, the sky is often strangely calm, and Rome, in the spring of 44 BC, was as calm as ever. But don't let the calm fool you. Behind the marble walls, behind the white togas, whispers of betrayal, and a dagger hidden in his back, waiting for the fateful moment. After his victory in the Civil War, Julius Caesar was the most powerful man in Rome, perhaps the most powerful man in the world at the time. He was named Dictator Perpetuo, dictator for life. His name was engraved on coins. His seat was higher than that of the senators in the Senate. He had the army, the people, and the respect of his old enemies. But Rome was still Rome. Beneath the Republican facade, hearts still hated despotism. They could forgive the victor, but not the would-be king. And Caesar, though he never claimed to be king, increasingly acted like one. The Romans were superstitious. They believed in omens, astrology, and signs from the gods. And then, the signs began to appear. In the night sky, a comet flashed. Minor earthquakes shook the temples. A fortune teller warned Caesar to be careful on March 15th, the Ides of March. Caesar, as usual, smiled. He did not believe much in omens. Or maybe he thought he was above fate. In the Senate, the simmering discontent began to take the shape of intrigue. More than 60 senators from all walks of life, from nobles to officers, from fallen men to those who had been favored by Caesar, gathered in secret. They wanted to kill more than just one man. They wanted to kill the idea that an individual could rise above the Republic. Two names stood out in the lead: Gaius Cassius, a cold-blooded aristocrat who had served Pompey, and Marcus Junius Brutus, whom Caesar had adopted as his adopted son. Brutus was a symbol. His ancestor had overthrown the last Roman king, Tarquin the Arrogant. If anyone could do for the Republic, it was Brutus. The morning of March 15th, 44 BC, was foggy. Caesar awoke in a state of unease. His wife, Calpurnia, had had a strange dream. A statue of Caesar was bleeding like a fountain, and the people were scooping it up with their hands. She begged him to stay home. Caesar hesitated. But then a senator, Decimus, one of the conspirators, arrived and convinced him that his absence would be considered an insult to the Senate. He put on a white toga, tied with a red sash. He got into a palanquin and went to the Curia, where the Senate met, unaware that he was walking into a trap. In Pompey's Curia, a small hall near the Forum, the senators had gathered. Caesar sat down on a chair. One came forward to present his complaint. Another pulled at his toga to hold his shoulders. Then, a knife stabbed him in the neck. Then a second. Then a third. Then more than 20. Caesar tried to resist, but could not escape. Blood poured onto the marble floor. Finally, when he saw Brutus also holding a knife, he could only utter the words, "Et tu, Brute? You too, Brutus?" and fell, dead at the foot of Pompey's statue. When news of Caesar's assassination spread, Rome was stunned. The people panicked. Some senators fled. Some assassins tried to justify themselves. They believed that they had freed Rome from a tyrant, that the Republic would now be restored, that the people would applaud them as heroes. But they were wrong. Caesar's funeral was a political nightmare for the assassins. Caesar's confidant Mark Antony made a moving speech in the Forum. He held up Caesar's will, which left most of his fortune to the Roman people. He pointed to the stab wound in Caesar's shirt, naming each of the assassins. The people wept, then anger, Then riots. They burned Caesar's body in the middle of the square. A statue was erected. His name became a symbol. Caesar left more than a corpse. He left an idea, a path, and an heir. His name was Gaius Octavius, Caesar's nephew. In his will, Caesar adopted him as his son, giving him a new name, Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus. Octavian was only 18 years old. Thin and quiet, no one expected him to make it big. But don't let his appearance fool you. Octavian had a sharp mind, the patience of a snake, and an unbreakable will. And he vowed to avenge Caesar. The conspirators, Cassius, Brutus, fled Rome. They occupied the eastern provinces, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Meanwhile, Octavian, together with Mark Antony and Lepidus, formed the Second Triumvirate. They drew up lists of hundreds of names to assassinate those who supported the conspirators. A period of great bloodshed began. Brutus and Cassius were finally defeated at the Battle of Philippi, 42 BC. Both committed suicide. The Republic, the name still lingered, but in reality, had died with the fall of Caesar. After Caesar's death, power was again contested, this time between Mark Antony and Octavian. Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt and Caesar's former lover, also entered the final game. But that is a story for another chapter. What we need to remember today is that the death of Julius Caesar was not just the death of a man. It was the death of an era, a republic where power belonged to the Senate, where the once vaunted ideal of liberty had died. Rome was now entering the dawn of a new age, the age of emperors. And it all began with a single stroke. Did you know? Not all wars leave the biggest mark. Sometimes, it's the years of peace, quiet, and longevity that make an empire great. The Pax Romana, or Roman peace, was one of those periods. Not without war, not without riots, but it was the 200 years when the Roman Empire reached its peak of stability, growth, and influence. And it all started with one man, Augustus Caesar. After the death of Julius Caesar, Rome fell into a spiral of power struggles. Among the big names like Mark Antony, Cleopatra, Lepidus, a young, skinny, seemingly obscure man, gradually became the last one standing. Octavian, Caesar's adopted son and heir, defeated Antony and Cleopatra at the Battle of Actium, 31 BC. A year later, he became the undisputed ruler of the entire empire. But Octavian was wiser than his adoptive father. He did not call himself king, did not wear a crown, did not wear the royal purple. Instead, in 27 BC, he declared that he was handing over power to the Senate. The Senate, knowing full well that this was just a formality, gave him the title Augustus, the Great. Thus, the Roman Empire was officially born. Augustus was the first emperor, although on paper he was only the first citizen, princeps. As soon as he took power, Augustus began an unprecedented reform. He reorganized the army, placing it all under his command, and created the Praetorian Guard. He created professional governors to rule the provinces, replacing the previous system of political appointments. A new tax system was established, fair, transparent, and free from manipulation by private contractors. In the heart of the city, Augustus began to rebuild Rome. "I have taken Rome in bricks, and I will leave it in marble." He built temples, arenas, aqueducts, and a host of public works. The whole city seemed to be dressed in a new coat, magnificent and orderly. The Pax Romana was not just about political stability. It was also about social stability, a new order that Augustus skillfully established. He enacted moral laws, encouraging marriage, discouraging adultery, and promoting childbearing. Family, religion, and loyalty to the empire became the pillars of society. Clergy, poets, and historians were encouraged to praise the empire and its traditional values. This period produced great names such as Virgil with the Aeneid, the epic poem of Rome; Livy, the historian with the history of Rome from the foundation of the country; Horace, Ovid, poets of love, beauty, and culture. Rome was not only a military power, but also the center of civilization of the entire ancient world. Under Augustus and his successors, the empire's borders expanded to an overwhelming extent. In the west, Rome controlled all of Western Europe, from Iberia, Spain, to Gaul, France. In the east, they dominated Greece, Asia Minor, advanced to Armenia, and almost touched Persia. In the south, they controlled all of Egypt, the fertile land on the banks of the Nile. In the north, the legions advanced deep into Germania, although they were forced to retreat after the Battle of Teutoburg in 9 AD. The Roman roads, or the Vie Romani, were built across the empire, connecting more than 50 million people of many races, languages, and religions. An incredibly efficient network of information, trade, and administration emerged. After Augustus, the Roman Empire fell into the hands of many emperors, some great, some tyrants. Tiberius Augustus' adopted son, ruled steadily but coldly. Caligula, famous for his madness and cruelty. Claudius, unexpectedly elected emperor, but expanded the empire to Britannia. Nero, hated by the people and was the first to persecute Christians. However, by the 2nd century, the empire entered the height of the Pax Romana under the 5 good emperors. Nerva ascended the throne by the Senate's choice, initiating the tradition of selecting successors based on merit. Trajan, a talented general, brought the empire to its largest area in history. Hadrian focused on strengthening the borders, building Hadrian's Wall in Britain. Antoninus Pius ruled in peace and justice. Marcus Aurelius, philosopher-emperor, author of Self-Reflections, ruled and fought to protect the empire. This was the Golden Age, a world where Roman law, trade, culture, and language became the glue that held the ancient world together. During the Pax Romana, the lives of ordinary people improved dramatically. In the cities, people had access to clean water through aqueducts, public baths, markets, and cultural facilities such as amphitheaters and theaters. The middle-class merchants, officials, and businessmen flourished. In the countryside, people lived under the protection of Roman law, paid taxes, and were guaranteed security. The provinces, even those far from the center, still felt part of Rome. Gauls, Hispanics, Syrians, gradually Romanized, learned Latin, worshipped Roman gods, and could become citizens. What was special about the Pax Romana was not just the lack of major wars, but the sense of security and stability. A cloth merchant from Palestine could travel to Rome without fear of being robbed. A young woman in North Africa could write a letter to her relative in Spain and trust that the letter would reach her. A veteran could go home and plant a vineyard without fear of being conscripted. Rome created a predictable world, and in the uncertain ancient world, that was rare. The Pax Romana did not last forever. After Marcus Aurelius died in 180 AD, his son Commodus succeeded him and began a series of declines. Then succession struggles, civil wars, economic crises, and external pressures gradually dragged Rome into darkness. But that is a story for later chapters. The Pax Romana was over, but the question remains: how could such a vast, diverse empire have remained stable for 2 centuries? The answer is not simple. It was probably due to political ingenuity, tight organization, an efficient administrative network, and an ideology that placed Rome at the center of the universe. Whatever the reason, the Pax Romana remains one of those rare miracles of human history, where peace was not a lull between wars, but a period long enough to create civilization. There was a time when Rome was at peace for 200 years. But then, as is the natural course of history, that stability began to crumble from within, not by external enemies, but by those who sat on the throne. In this chapter, we will enter a darker period in Roman history, where great emperors gradually disappeared, and in their place were madmen, tyrants, and full of contradictions. In 180 AD, Emperor Marcus Aurelius died. He was not only a talented king, but also a profound philosopher who wrote the Self-Meditations, musings on responsibility and the self. But his successor, Commodus, was different. Marcus's biological son, Commodus, ascended the throne at the age of 19. Initially, people hoped that he would continue his father's virtues. But soon everyone realized Commodus was the beginning of an era of chaos. Commodus did not care about politics. He left the power to his courtiers, who were only interested in plundering and manipulating the court. But what was even more strange was that he often appeared in the arena, not to watch, but to participate in the fighting. He considered himself the incarnation of Hercules, often wearing the skin of a lion and holding a club like a god. The people were terrified. The nobility was amazed, but no one dared to speak up. He even renamed the city of Rome after himself, changed the names of the months, and even changed the titles of high-ranking positions in the court. Everything had to be named Commodus. In 192, he was assassinated by his own lover with the help of the royal guards. Commodus's death marked the end of the Antoninus dynasty and ushered in a dark period known as the crisis of the 3rd century. After Commodus's death, power fell into chaos. In 193 AD, 4 men became emperors in the space of 12 months. Pertinax, chosen by the Senate, killed by the Praetorian Guard after 3 months. Didius Julianus, who bought the throne from the Guard, executed within weeks. Pescennius Niger and Clodius Albinus, rebel governors who declared themselves emperors. And finally Septimius Severus, a general from Pannonia, who won them all. Severus took the throne, but at the cost of the army's understanding of its power. We can make an emperor. From then on, each time there was a crisis, the legions put forward their own candidates. The empire fell into a cycle of constant civil war, where the throne became a commodity traded with swords. After Severus died, power fell to his 2 sons, Caracalla and Geta. But within a few months, Caracalla murdered his brother in his mother's arms. He became sole emperor, ruling with cruelty and fear. But at the same time, Caracalla issued the most far-reaching decree in Roman history. In 212 AD, he declared all free inhabitants of the empire to be Roman citizens. There was no longer any distinction between Italians, Gauls, Greeks, or Egyptians, all civis Romanus. Perhaps he did this to increase the number of people subject to taxation. But the legacy, a more unified empire, more Romanization, and citizenship rights spread across 3 continents. After Caracalla, the throne fell to Elagabalus, a 14-year-old boy, supported by his mother and grandmother. Elagabalus was a priest of the eastern sun god Elagabal, a non-Roman deity. He brought this religion to the center of Rome, built a new temple, and forced Roman gods to marry Elagabal. The bizarre rituals, dances, blood, music, and sacrifices terrified the Roman people. Elagabalus was also famous for his eccentric lifestyle, dressing in women's clothes, wearing makeup, acting like the wife of his guards, and claiming to want to undergo surgery to become a woman. Unable to bear it any longer, Praetorian guards killed him in 222 and threw his body into the Tiber River. His successor, Alexander Severus, tried to restore order. He reigned for 13 years, trying to reconcile factions, improve administration, and strengthen the borders. But the emperor's confidence had been deeply eroded, and the army, accustomed to politics, no longer obeyed anyone. In 235, Alexander was killed by his own soldiers. From there, Rome fell into the crisis of the 3rd century, a period of nearly 50 years with dozens of emperors, mostly soldiers, many of whom reigned for only a few months. During this period, the empire was almost in pieces. In the east, the Syrian emperors declared independence. In the west, the Gallic region split into a separate Gallic empire. Enemies from outside the borders, Goths, Vandals, Sassanids, are constantly invaded. A few brilliant emperors such as Aurelian, Probus tried to reunite the empire, rebuild the system. But the foundations were shaky. The emperor now had to be a general, a diplomat, an economist, a god, and sometimes only lived for a few months. Never before in Roman history has the throne ceased to be sacred, but became a hot seat, touched and burned. Between 235 and 284 AD, the records record more than 26 official emperors and dozens of self-proclaimed ones. Very few of them died natural deaths. Rome was strained by war, inflation, famine, and disease. The currency lost value. Peasants abandoned their fields. Trade stagnated. Cities deserted. The great works remained, but inside, the empire was rotting. The mad emperors were not just eccentric individuals. They were symptoms of a deeper disease, a political system that had gone out of fashion, a society that was falling apart, an empire too large to control. From a world of order and stability under the Pax Romana, Rome now lived in uncertainty, fear, and suspicion. But in times of crisis, there is always a glimmer of hope. In the next chapter, we will meet a man not of noble birth, not chosen by the Senate, but who reformed the entire empire with an iron fist. That is Diocletian, the man who split Rome in two to save it. Augustus brought Rome 200 years of peace, a period known as the Pax Romana, a rare respite from the bloodshed and ambition. But beneath the splendor are unanswered questions. Can an empire built on war ever truly be at peace? Does that peace come from the people or from absolute control? In the next section, we will walk through that glorious period, from the magnificent works to the famous emperors like Trajan, Hadrian, and Marcus Aurelius, and follow each sign that foreshadows the inevitable decline, gentle but unstoppable.